47-year-old operative ignored by family. Then the wedding invitation arrived with no personal note. At 47, I thought the worst betrayals happened on foreign battlefields, not at family weddings. My name is Christopher Kane, and I'd spent the last decade in classified operations that don't officially exist, protecting people who'd never know my name. But nothing prepared me for discovering my own sister was being used as a pawn in a conspiracy that could have destroyed everything I'd fought to protect. What happened next at that upscale Hamptons wedding would expose a web of lies that reached the highest levels of government, and I was about to make sure everyone involved paid the ultimate price. I found out Isabella was getting married because someone tagged me in the Instagram photos at 6:48 in the morning. My Armani dress shoes were still damp from the classified briefing in northern Vermont, and I'd just stepped back into my Manhattan penthouse, dropping my encrypted leather case on the Italian marble floor. I rarely checked personal social media, which is probably why the algorithm thought I might want to see a photo of my sister in an ivory Vera Wang gown, spinning under crystal chandeliers next to a man I'd never seen before. Tagged Isabella Kane and Alexander Donovan. The caption read, "She said yes to forever." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the image, then scrolled through dozens more. There were engagement ring shots worth more than most people's cars, group photos on the manicured lawns of the Donovan estate, Isabella's radiant smile catching golden hour light like something from Architectural Digest. And me? I wasn't in any of them. Of course not. I hadn't even known she was engaged. A bitter laugh escaped my throat, not from surprise, but from that deep, soul-crushing realization that some wounds never fully heal. They just wait in the shadows for the perfect moment to remind you they're still there. My thumb lingered above the comments section. My mother Catherine had left a parade of champagne glass emojis. My father William had reposted the announcement with a caption about legacy, tradition, and family values. The same family that hadn't sent so much as a text message, not even a courtesy heads up about the engagement. I hadn't spoken to Isabella in over 18 months, not since I'd sent a birthday message that she'd left unread. She'd been slowly disappearing from my life like morning mist. But this was a deliberate erasure. I set the phone face down on the Carrara marble countertop and walked to the bathroom, habit forcing me to scrub my hands clean of any trace from the last 48 hours spent deep in military-grade intelligence work. My reflection stared back, still carrying the exhaustion that comes from briefings that officially never happened. My hair was shorter now, precision cut, more corporate executive than battlefield operative. I looked like a man who belonged in boardrooms, not someone whose sister had just announced her wedding to complete strangers on social media. The knock on my door was so soft, I almost missed it. I dried my hands and opened it to find the hallway empty, just a thick cream envelope on the Persian rug. The paper was museum quality, the kind of stationery that screamed old money and careful breeding. My heart rate spiked, then crashed when I saw the addressing. Not Christopher, not even Mr. Christopher Kane, just the Kane family, like I was an afterthought added to a mailing list. Inside, the invitation was breathtakingly elegant, embossed in rose gold script that probably cost more per letter than most people spend on dinner. Isabella Marie Kane and Alexander James Donovan cordially request your presence at their wedding celebration at Whitmore Estate, Southampton, New York, the 18th of November, 2023. No personal note, no RSVP card, just a QR code to scan if you plan to attend. I stared at it, wondering if someone had simply added my name at the last minute to avoid awkward questions from distant relatives. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "If you decide to come, please wear charcoal or navy. Nothing that draws attention." No hello, no acknowledgement that I'd received the invitation, just a dress code warning like I was some unpredictable element that might disrupt her perfectly orchestrated event. I leaned against the granite kitchen island, watching the early morning light filter through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. The silence in my penthouse felt heavier than it should have. Somewhere far below, the city was waking up, but in here, surrounded by museum-quality art and furniture that cost more than most people's homes, it was still, too still. I opened the Sub-Zero refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of Perrier, the bubbles sharp and clean against my tongue. It tasted like clarity, like the moment before everything changes forever. My encrypted phone vibrated against the marble, A call from Natasha, my former team leader who now ran private intelligence operations from a glass tower in DC. Christopher. Her voice was tight with static and something else. Concern maybe. You've seen it? The photos? Yeah, I said, my voice flat as Winterstone. You're not seriously considering going? I didn't answer immediately. She knew better than to push when I went silent like this. You know why, she added quietly. Because they erased me, I said, the words tasting like ashes. And now they're celebrating without checking if I'm still breathing. I ended the call and sat on the edge of my king-sized bed, the invitation resting beside me like evidence of a crime I couldn't quite name yet. I picked it up again, held it over the titanium waste basket, my fingers trembling not from fear, but from something deeper, older. My mother's voice echoed in my memory, cold and precise. Don't come unless you're prepared to blend into the background like a proper guest, not create a scene. I took a slow breath, then without understanding why, I folded the invitation carefully and slipped it into the breast pocket of my Tom Ford blazer. I didn't owe them an appearance. I certainly didn't owe them forgiveness. But maybe, just maybe, I owed myself something I hadn't been able to name yet. My secure watch pulsed once, barely perceptible against my wrist. I tapped it twice, and the encrypted display came alive with a message that made my blood freeze. If you still care about Isabella's safety, show up. Someone else is already watching her. I arrived at Whitmore Estate 3 hours before the ceremony, my Aston Martin purring to a stop outside wrought iron gates that probably cost more than most people's houses. The drive from Manhattan had taken me through rolling hills painted in autumn gold, past estates that looked like they'd been transplanted from English countryside. This was old money territory, the kind of wealth that whispered rather than shouted, and I fit right in with my Brioni suit and Italian leather shoes. The estate itself was breathtaking in that effortless way that only comes from generations of careful cultivation. Limestone columns supported a portico that could have housed a small village, while perfectly manicured gardens stretched toward a private coastline where waves lapped against a private dock lined with yachts that cost more than small countries' GDP. I sat in my car for several minutes, watching black-clad staff in crisp uniforms direct arriving guests with choreographed precision. Women emerged from Bentleys and Maseratis wearing designer gowns that probably required personal stylists, while men in hand-tailored suits moved with the confidence that comes from never having to check price tags. This was Isabella's new world, and I understood now why my invitation had felt like an afterthought. I walked through the main entrance, past crystal chandeliers that caught the afternoon light like captured stars. The check-in area was set up beneath a vaulted ceiling painted with Renaissance-style frescoes, where 2 impeccably dressed young women managed guest lists on rose gold iPads that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Name? One asked without looking up, her manicured fingers hovering over the screen. Christopher Kane. Her hands stopped moving. She scrolled up, then down, then back up again, a small frown creasing her otherwise perfect makeup. I'm not seeing a Christopher Kane listed, she said, glancing at her colleague with barely concealed panic. Are you with the Donovan family? I'm the bride's brother. The silence that followed was profound enough to cut. Within seconds, a supervisor appeared, a woman in her 50s, wearing an expression of practiced crisis management. She didn't ask questions, just smiled with the kind of warmth that never reaches the eyes and gestured toward the east wing of the estate. Right this way, Mr. Kane. We have a lovely spot prepared for you. I was led past the main reception area, where guests were already gathering around ice sculptures and champagne fountains that belonged in museums. None of the conversations paused as I walked by, but I caught the sideways glances, the subtle shift in body language that comes when people recognize they're in the presence of someone who doesn't quite belong to their carefully curated world. My seat was in what they politely called the intimate family section, a smaller area separated from the main ceremony space by towering floral arrangements that cost more than luxury cars. I found myself placed next to a distant cousin I hadn't seen since childhood, close enough to technically be part of the family, far enough away that my presence wouldn't disturb the carefully orchestrated photos that would inevitably grace the society pages. Catherine entered 20 minutes later, surrounded by women whose jewelry could have funded small nations. Her Chanel suit was the color of champagne, perfectly coordinated with pearls that had probably been in the family longer than most democracies. She looked directly at me, and for a moment, something flickered in her expression that might have been maternal recognition before it hardened into social necessity. "Christopher," she said, approaching with the careful steps of someone navigating a potential minefield. "You came." "I did." "You look." She paused, her eyes scanning my appearance like she was checking for flaws. "Appropriate." "Thank you for respecting the dress code." There was no embrace, no warmth, just the kind of acknowledgement you might give to a piece of furniture that had been placed correctly. My father appeared next, deep in conversation with a man whose suit probably cost more than most people's cars. William caught sight of me and offered a single nod, the kind of greeting you might give to a business associate you'd rather not see at a social function. I watched the pre-ceremony reception unfold like a perfectly choreographed performance. Distant relatives flowed through the space holding crystal flutes of Dom Perignon, their laughter carefully modulated to suggest joy without vulgarity. Every few minutes, someone would glance in my direction, then quickly look away, as if I were a puzzle they couldn't quite solve but didn't want to examine too closely. Then Isabella appeared, and the entire room seemed to inhale collectively. She was luminous in the way that only comes from happiness, health, and clothing that costs more than most people's annual salaries. Her Marchesa gown flowed around her like liquid silk, and her smile was the kind that graces magazine covers and inspires poetry. She moved through the crowd with her bridesmaids, all of them looking like they'd stepped out of a luxury lifestyle commercial. Her eyes swept the room, paused near my section, but didn't linger. She didn't approach, didn't break stride, didn't even acknowledge my presence with so much as a flicker of recognition. It was as if I existed in a parallel dimension, visible but irrelevant to the narrative unfolding around me. I remembered something William had said at a charity gala years ago. Family isn't about emotions, it's about maintaining appearances. He hadn't been speaking to me directly, but perhaps he never was. I was the footnote in their story, the reminder of complications they'd rather forget. A wave of applause rippled through the crowd as the officiant took his position beneath an arch of white roses that probably cost more than luxury cars. I clapped twice, then stopped, my hands resting in my lap like dead weight. The music swelled, guests leaned forward with anticipation, and I found myself scanning the crowd with the trained eye of someone who'd spent years identifying threats in beautiful disguises. That's when I noticed him. Third row from the center, a man in an impeccably tailored gray suit sat with calculated casualness, but his posture was wrong, too alert, too focused. For a split second, our eyes met, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Recognition mixed with something that looked like professional interest. Then he looked away, melting back into the crowd of wedding guests like he'd never been there at all. In my world, threats don't always announce themselves with guns and explosions. Sometimes they serve champagne and wear Armani suits, blending into the background until the moment they strike. That's when I realized this wedding wasn't just about celebrating Isabella's happiness. Someone was here who didn't belong, and whatever they wanted, it was worth infiltrating one of the most exclusive social events of the season to get it. The waiter who glided past me carrying sterling silver trays of imported caviar and gold leaf-garnished canapes moved with the kind of precision that spoke of military training disguised as hospitality. His Berluti shoes were too expensive for catering staff, and the Mont Blanc pen tucked discreetly in his vest pocket cost more than most people's monthly car payments. But it was the way his eyes continuously swept the room, cataloging exits and guest positions, that triggered every alarm bell in my operationally trained mind. The cocktail reception had been flowing for 37 minutes, and already the atmosphere hummed with an undercurrent that felt wrong beneath the surface glamour. The laughter was too perfect, the positioning of the baccarat crystal centerpieces too geometrically precise, and the LED lighting system overhead had flickered twice in a pattern I recognized from surveillance operations in Geneva. That wasn't ambient mood lighting, that was a coded signal. I maintained my position near the marble fireplace, scanning the perimeter with the trained awareness of someone who'd spent a decade identifying threats in five-star hotels and embassy ballrooms. The soaring ceilings, hand-painted frescoes, and silk window treatments created the perfect cover for sophisticated surveillance equipment. The air carried the scent of imported French roses and something else, something metallic, that reminded me of active electronics operating just beyond normal hearing range. That's when I spotted him across the room, and my world tilted on its axis. Marcus Whitfield, leaning against a Corinthian column with studied nonchalance, holding a Waterford crystal tumbler filled with what looked like 30-year-old Macallan, but probably wasn't alcohol at all. His hair was silver now, his Savile Row suit immaculate, but his eyes held the same cold calculation I remembered from operations that officially never happened. Our gazes locked for less than a heartbeat before he turned and walked away, disappearing behind a group of socialites discussing their latest acquisitions from Sotheby's. I followed, keeping my movements casual, just another wedding guest admiring the estate's museum-quality art collection. Near the library's towering mahogany shelves, he stopped beside a display of first-edition volumes and spoke without looking at me, his voice barely above a whisper. Still playing the mysterious operative, "Aren't you Kane?" I didn't respond immediately, instead positioning myself where I could monitor both him and the main reception area through the library's French doors. "Signal traffic everywhere," he continued, selecting a leather-bound volume and pretending to examine its spine. "Audio feeds have been compromised, but not by hotel security. Someone with serious resources has turned this wedding into a data collection operation." "Who's running it?" I asked, my voice equally quiet. "Someone who knows exactly which buttons to push to get your attention." He replaced the book and finally turned to meet my eyes. "The encryption signatures match operations from the Meridian files." "But that's impossible, isn't it? Those files were supposed to be permanently buried." My blood turned to ice. The Meridian files contained intelligence that could destroy careers, topple governments, and expose operations that 3 different nations had agreed should never see daylight. If someone was using wedding surveillance to access that data, then Isabella's marriage wasn't a celebration. It was a cover for something that could reshape global intelligence networks. I reached for the signal detector in my jacket pocket, a device no larger than a luxury pen that cost more than most people's cars. Moving toward the main reception area, I aimed it discreetly at the sound system where a technician in designer clothing was adjusting equipment that looked far too sophisticated for wedding entertainment. The device vibrated twice, then displayed a readout that made my mouth go dry. Military-grade encryption, frequency patterns that matched classified communication protocols, and a data signature I'd last seen in operations rooms that didn't officially exist. Someone was using Isabella's wedding to broadcast intelligence that could compromise national security, and they were doing it through equipment disguised as luxury event technology. My encrypted phone buzzed with an incoming message from a number I hadn't seen in years. "Mr. Kane, we need to discuss your sister's choice in wedding vendors. Garden Terrace. 5 minutes. Come alone." I recognized the communication style immediately. Victoria Cross, former intelligence coordinator turned private security consultant for clients whose names appeared on Forbes lists and government watch lists with equal frequency. If she was here, then this operation was bigger than just surveillance. Someone was orchestrating something that required her particular skill set. And in my experience, Victoria only took contracts that involved reshaping entire geopolitical landscapes. I made my way toward the garden terrace, passing through French doors that opened onto manicured grounds where topiary art cost more than luxury homes. The evening air carried the scent of imported jasmine and something else, the ozone smell that comes from sophisticated electronic equipment operating at full capacity. Whatever was happening at this wedding, it was just beginning, and Isabella was either a willing participant or the most expensive pawn in a game that could destroy everything I'd spent my career protecting. The truth has a way of hiding in plain sight, especially when it's wrapped in $10,000 worth of Italian silk and hand-sewn with threads that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Isabella's bridal suite was a masterpiece of understated luxury, all cream silk wallpaper and crystal sconces that cast warm light across antique furniture worth more than small estates. The air smelled of La Mer skincare products and Hermes perfume, but underneath it all was something else. Something that made my operationally trained instincts scream warnings. I closed the door behind me without knocking, the Italian brass lock clicking with the finality of a vault ceiling. Isabella stood before a full-length mirror framed in hand-carved Venetian gold, her Ellie's sob gown flowing around her like captured moonlight. Every detail was perfection itself, from the hand-sewn pearls to the Belgian lace that probably took artisans months to create. But it was her hands that caught my attention, trembling slightly as she adjusted invisible flaws in fabric that had been fitted by designers who normally dress royalty. "You're not supposed to be in here," she said, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who'd grown accustomed to having her boundaries respected without question. "You're not supposed to be broadcasting classified intelligence through your wedding dress," I replied, stepping closer with the deliberate precision of someone who'd spent years navigating hostile territory disguised as social events. Her reflection met my eyes in the mirror, and I watched a dozen emotions flicker across her face like shadows cast by candlelight. Confusion, indignation, denial, but beneath them all, fear that ran deeper than social embarrassment or family drama. This was the kind of fear that comes from realizing you've been played by professionals who operate in shadows and leave no traces. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Don't." The word came out harder than I intended. "I've already traced the transmission signatures. Military-grade encryption embedded in fabric that's supposed to be decorative. Someone turned your wedding gown into a broadcasting station, and they're using you to transmit intelligence that could compromise operations across 3 continents." She staggered back until her spine hit the antique vanity, her hands gripping the Carrara marble edge like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Someone gave me this dress," she said, her voice breaking. "Through the designer. Said it was a gift from an anonymous benefactor, someone who appreciated Alexander's family's philanthropic work. It was so beautiful, so perfect. I never thought to question it." "Who arranged the connection?" "A woman named Victoria Cross. She said she specialized in exclusive arrangements for high-profile weddings. Made it sound like an honor, like we'd been selected for something special." Isabella's voice dropped to barely audible. She was so sophisticated, so convincing. "Said the dress came with a complete security package, that important families needed protection from paparazzi and social media intrusion." I felt pieces clicking into place like a precision mechanism designed to detonate at exactly the right moment. Victoria Cross wasn't just providing security. She was orchestrating intelligence collection on a scale that suggested government-level resources and international scope. Isabella hadn't just been chosen for her social connections. She'd been selected because her marriage would provide access to networks that spanned corporate boardrooms and government offices across multiple nations. "Show me the dress," I said, my voice gentler now. She hesitated, then slowly lifted the edges of the train, revealing layers of silk and tulle that probably cost more than luxury cars. I knelt carefully, my fingers precise as I examined the inner construction. There, sewn into the foundation layer with thread that looked decorative but felt wrong under my trained touch, was a transmission device the size of a pearl button, practically invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. My scanner revealed what I'd already suspected: active encryption, real-time data collection, and transmission protocols that matched classified operations I'd helped design years ago. But this wasn't just surveillance. The frequency pattern suggested this device was designed to intercept and redirect secure communications, turning Isabella into an unwitting relay station for intelligence that could reshape global power structures. "Isabella," I said, looking up at her reflection in the mirror, "whatever they told you about security, this isn't protection. This is weaponization. They're using your wedding to access communications networks that could expose or compromise operations affecting national security across multiple countries." She sank onto the silk-upholstered ottoman, her face pale beneath makeup that probably required a team of artists to achieve. "What have I done?" she whispered. "What have I gotten everyone into?" Before I could answer, my encrypted phone buzzed with a message that made everything crystal clear. "The transmission is complete. Phase 2 begins when she walks down the aisle. Her new husband's family connections will provide access to networks we've been trying to penetrate for years. Thank you for your unwitting cooperation." The ceremony had officially become a national security crisis disguised as a society wedding, and I was the only person in the room who understood that we were all sitting on top of an intelligence operation that could reshape the global balance of power. The question wasn't whether I could stop it, but whether I could do so without destroying my sister's life in the process. Every military operation has a moment when everything hinges on split-second decisions, but I never expected that moment to arrive while my sister was adjusting her veil in front of a mirror that probably costs more than most people's homes. The transmission device hidden in her Ellie Saab gown wasn't just collecting data. It was actively redirecting secure communications through networks that could expose or compromise operations I'd helped design during my years in classified intelligence work. Isabella, listen to me very carefully, I said, standing and moving to the French doors that overlooked the estate's manicured gardens. This wedding isn't just being monitored, it's being used as a cover for an intelligence operation that could affect national security. The people who gave you that dress aren't protecting you, they're using you as an unwitting asset in something much larger than social surveillance. She stared at me with the kind of expression that comes when your world shifts fundamentally and permanently. Are you saying my wedding is some kind of spy operation? I'm saying your wedding dress is broadcasting classified intelligence to networks that shouldn't exist, and the woman who arranged it specializes in operations that reshape geopolitical landscapes. I checked my watch, calculating timing and variables like I was planning an extraction under hostile fire. The ceremony starts in 18 minutes. Once you walk down that aisle, the transmission protocols activate, and whatever they're planning moves to the next phase. What do you want me to do? Her voice was steady now, the kind of calm that comes when shock transforms into operational focus. Cancel the wedding. Destroy the dress? Announce to 300 guests that my brother thinks I'm part of an international conspiracy? Before I could respond, the door opened with the soft click of expensive hardware. Victoria Cross stepped inside, her Hermes suit impeccable, her smile warm and professionally reassuring. She was exactly what central casting would order for a luxury wedding coordinator, elegant, sophisticated, and absolutely lethal in ways that most people would never recognize. Mr. Kane, she said, closing the door behind her with practiced precision. I was hoping we'd have a chance to speak before the ceremony began. Victoria. I positioned myself between her and Isabella, my posture casual but ready. I have to say, using a family wedding as cover for intelligence collection shows remarkable creativity, even by your standards. Her laugh was genuine, the kind that comes from professional appreciation. You always were direct. It's one of the qualities that made you so effective in operations that officially never happened. She moved to the window, her eyes scanning the garden where guests were beginning to move toward the ceremony location. But this isn't about intelligence collection, Christopher. This is about intelligence prevention. Explain. The Meridian files, she said, and my blood went cold. Someone has been systematically exposing classified operations from multiple countries, selling intelligence to highest bidders, destabilizing the entire networks we've spent decades building. The transmissions we've detected suggest the leak is coming from someone with access to networks that span corporate boardrooms and government offices. Isabella stood slowly, her gown rustling like expensive whispers. Are you saying someone is using my wedding to catch a spy? I'm saying your wedding guest list includes someone who's been selling state secrets to foreign intelligence services, Victoria replied. And the only way to identify them is to monitor their communications when they think they're in a secure environment surrounded by trusted associates. My encrypted phone buzzed with an incoming data stream. The signal analysis showed active transmissions from multiple sources within the estate, but one stood out with encryption signatures that matched classified operations from operations I'd helped design. Someone was using the wedding's communication networks to access files that should have been permanently buried, and they were doing it in real time, while guests sipped champagne and admired floral arrangements that cost more than luxury cars. The transmission device in Isabella's dress isn't broadcasting intelligence. I realized, the pieces clicking into place like a precision mechanism. It's collecting it. You're using her as bait to identify whoever's been selling secrets. Victoria's smile was razor sharp. Your sister married into one of the most connected families in international finance and government contracting. Her wedding guest list reads like a directory of people with access to classified information across multiple countries. Whoever's been selling secrets couldn't resist the opportunity to access the kind of network concentration in a single location. And you turned my wedding into a trap, Isabella said, her voice carrying deadly calm. I turned your wedding into justice, Victoria replied. But only if we can identify the source before they realize what's happening and disappear back into whatever shadows they've been operating from. The ceremony was about to begin, And somewhere among the 300 guests drinking Dom Perignon and admiring museum-quality art was someone who'd been selling state secrets to foreign powers. The question wasn't whether we could catch them, but whether we could do it without turning Isabella's perfect day into an international incident that would make headlines across multiple continents. My sister deserved her fairy tale wedding, but some fairy tales require slaying dragons that wear Armani suits and smile, while they betray everything you've sworn to protect. The grand ballroom at Whitmore Estate was designed to make mere mortals feel like they'd ascended to some higher plane of existence. All hand-painted ceilings and crystal chandeliers that caught the afternoon light like captured stars. 300 guests sat in perfectly arranged rows, their combined net worth probably exceeding the GDP of small nations, sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. I remained in my designated seat in the family section, positioned close enough to be acknowledged as blood relation, but far enough from the main action that my presence wouldn't disrupt the carefully choreographed photos that would inevitably grace the society pages of publications read by people who measured success in terms of yacht length and private jet flight hours. From my vantage point, I could see everything. The tight smiles that never quite reached anyone's eyes. The practiced conversations that touched on charity galas and art acquisitions while carefully avoiding anything resembling genuine emotion, and the way certain guests positioned themselves with the strategic awareness of people who understood that information was currency and proximity was power. Marcus Whitfield sat in the third row, his Brioni suit impeccable, his posture relaxed but alert. He hadn't acknowledged my presence since our brief encounter in the library, but I could feel his awareness like static electricity in the air. Somewhere in this room was the person we were hunting, someone who'd been selling state secrets while attending charity benefits and art gallery openings, hiding in plain sight among people who considered discretion a survival skill. The music swelled as the officiant took his position beneath an arch of white roses that probably cost more than luxury cars. Guests leaned forward with practiced anticipation, smartphones discreetly positioned behind designer programs. It was the kind of wedding that would be dissected in society magazines and imitated by people who could never afford to achieve such effortless perfection. Then Isabella appeared, and the entire room seemed to catch its collective breath. She was luminous in the way that only comes from perfect lighting, perfect styling, and the kind of happiness that money can't buy but certainly helps facilitate. Her Ellie Saab gown flowed around her like liquid silk, every detail crafted by artisans who normally worked for royalty and heads of state. She walked down the aisle on William's arm, both of them moving with the practiced grace of people who'd been photographed at public events since childhood. They passed my row without acknowledgement, just as I'd expected, but for a split second, Isabella's eyes found mine, and I saw something there that looked like gratitude mixed with terror. The officiant's voice carried perfectly through the sound system as he began the ceremony with words about love, commitment, and the joining of two families whose combined influence stretched across multiple continents and industries. I wasn't listening to the vows, though. I was monitoring the signal traffic through my discreet scanner, watching for the transmission spikes that would indicate someone was using the ceremony's communication networks to access classified files. That's when I noticed a subtle increase in electromagnetic activity originating from somewhere in the VIP section where Alexander's family sat surrounded by their closest associates. Someone was actively transmitting during the ceremony, using the emotional distraction and social protocol to conduct business that should never happen in public venues. My scanner identified the source. Senator Patricia Grayson, distinguished public servant and chairwoman of the Intelligence Oversight Committee, was using an encrypted device disguised as a vintage Carty compact to access files that contained operational details from missions I'd helped design. She was selling secrets in real time while watching my sister promise to love, honor, and cherish her new husband. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, not because I'd trusted Grayson, but because she was using Isabella's perfect moment as cover for treason that could compromise operations affecting thousands of lives across multiple countries. This wasn't just about intelligence theft. It was about corruption at levels that could destabilize entire government networks. I activated my emergency communication protocol, sending a coded message to Victoria that would trigger immediate intervention. But before the response team could move, Grayson stood, her movement creating just enough distraction to close her transmission and secure her device. She'd finished whatever business she'd come to conduct, and now she was preparing to disappear back into the shadows of legitimate government service. The ceremony continued with Alexander placing a ring on Isabella's finger that probably cost more than most people's homes, but I was already moving, calculating angles and timing like I was planning an extraction under hostile fire. Senator Grayson had just committed treason during my sister's wedding, and she was about to discover that some family members take betrayal very personally. Justice doesn't always announce itself with sirens and dramatic arrests. Sometimes it whispers through encrypted communications and unfolds with the precision of a military operation disguised as wedding coordination. The moment Senator Grayson transmitted classified intelligence through her vintage carded compact, she activated protocols that had been carefully planned for exactly this scenario. Victoria's response team moved with the kind of efficiency that comes from government training and unlimited budgets. They didn't rush or create disturbance. They simply materialized in strategic positions around the ballroom like well-dressed ghosts who specialized in making problems disappear permanently and completely. Two agents in Armani suits flanked the exits while maintaining perfect cover as additional wedding security. A third positioned herself near the champagne station, her Chanel suit and professional smile making her indistinguishable from the event coordinators who'd been managing logistics all day. When Grayson attempted to leave during the ring exchange, she found herself politely but firmly guided toward a private consultation room where her encrypted device would be examined by people who understood exactly what kind of damage she'd been doing to national security. The ceremony concluded with Isabella and Alexander sharing a kiss that would probably be featured on magazine covers across multiple countries, but I was already moving toward the reception area where the real business would be conducted. Grayson's arrest was just the beginning. The intelligence she'd been selling had compromised operations across 3 continents, and now we had the evidence to trace her entire network of contacts and customers. My encrypted phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. Package secured. Data recovery in progress. Your sister's wedding just prevented an intelligence catastrophe that could have affected global security for decades. The reception flowed seamlessly from ceremony to celebration, with guests moving between the ballroom and garden terrace like participants in a carefully choreographed performance. The string quartet transitioned to jazz standards while waiters circulated with canapes that probably cost more per bite than most people's entire meals. It was the kind of event that would be remembered in society circles for years, but for entirely different reasons than anyone anticipated. Isabella found me near the marble fireplace where Baccarat crystal sculptures caught the light like captured stars. She'd changed from her ceremony gown into a reception dress that probably cost more than luxury cars, but her eyes held the sharp awareness of someone who'd just learned that perfect weddings sometimes require stopping international conspiracies. "Is it over?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible above the conversation and laughter surrounding us. "The immediate threat is contained," I replied, watching as Victoria coordinated with her team through discreet communication that looked like routine event management. But Grayson's network extends beyond what we've identified today. This was just the beginning of unraveling something much larger. And my wedding? Your wedding just became the cover story for one of the most successful counterintelligence operations in recent history. I smiled, the first genuine expression I'd managed all day. When this story is finally declassified, historians will write about the intelligence operation that was disguised as a society wedding, not the other way around. Alexander appeared at Isabella's side, his expression carrying the kind of confusion that comes from realizing your wedding day involved stopping international espionage rather than just exchanging vows and cutting cake. Should I be concerned that my new brother-in-law just coordinated the arrest of a United States senator during our reception? He asked, his voice carrying the dry humor that probably made him successful in international finance. "Only if you're planning to sell state secrets," I replied. "Otherwise, you married into a family that takes national security very seriously." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd been the family embarrassment, the one whose career couldn't be discussed at dinner parties, whose achievements couldn't be celebrated because they'd officially never happened. Now I was the one who'd prevented an intelligence catastrophe during what was supposed to be the social event of the season. Catherine approached with the careful steps of someone navigating a minefield of social protocol and family dynamics that had just shifted fundamentally. Her Chanel suit was still immaculate, her pearls still perfect, but her expression carried something I hadn't seen in years. Pride mixed with understanding that maybe, just maybe, she'd underestimated her son's importance to the world. "Christopher," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. Victoria Cross explained what happened. "What you prevented." She paused, her hands smoothing invisible wrinkles from fabric that never creased. "I owe you an apology." "We all do." William joined us, his expression carrying the weight of a man who'd just learned that his son had been protecting national security while the family treated him like an inconvenience at social gatherings. "The Intelligence Committee chairwoman," he said quietly, "selling secrets at our daughter's wedding." "If you hadn't been here." "But I was here," I said simply. "And she's not selling secrets anymore." The reception continued around us, guests blissfully unaware that they'd just witnessed the conclusion of a counterintelligence operation that would be studied in training academies for decades. The champagne still flowed, the string quartet still played, and the wedding cake still waited to be cut in a ceremony that would complete Isabella's perfect day. Victoria appeared at my shoulder with the discreet timing of someone who specialized in appearing exactly when needed. "Senator Grayson's cooperation has been comprehensive," she said quietly. Her network included contacts in 12 countries and compromised operations dating back 8 years. Tonight's intervention prevented intelligence leaks that could have affected global security for decades. "What happens now?" Isabella asked. "Now you cut your wedding cake, dance with your new husband, and enjoy being married to someone whose family's international connections just became significantly more valuable to national security," Victoria replied with a smile that was both warm and terrifyingly professional. "And your brother returns to work that officially doesn't exist but occasionally prevents the collapse of civilization as we know it." As if on cue, the wedding coordinator announced that it was time for the cake-cutting ceremony. Isabella linked her arm through mine with surprising firmness. "You're not disappearing again," she said. "Not after this. We're family, and family stays for cake." I found myself being pulled toward the center of the reception area, where a wedding cake that probably cost more than most people's cars waited beneath lighting that had been designed to make everything look like a magazine photo shoot. For the first time in years, I wasn't standing outside the frame watching my family celebrate without me. I was part of the moment, part of the story, part of something that would be remembered long after the champagne glasses were cleared and the flowers had wilted. The photographer called for family photos, and this time, when she asked for immediate family only, Isabella reached for my hand and pulled me into the center of the group. Catherine positioned herself beside me, her earlier coolness replaced by something that looked remarkably like maternal pride. William stood behind us, his hand resting on my shoulder with the weight of acknowledgement that perhaps he'd been wrong about his son's value to the world. "Say something elegant," the photographer called, her camera poised to capture what would undoubtedly become the official image of the Kane family's reconciliation. "Justice," I said quietly, the word carrying weight that only half the people in the photo would ever understand. The camera clicked, and for a moment, we were just a family celebrating a wedding, not a group of people who'd just prevented an international intelligence catastrophe while maintaining perfect social protocol. But as the flash faded and the photographer moved on to capture other moments, I caught Victoria's eye across the room. She raised her champagne glass in a subtle salute, acknowledgement between professionals who understood that sometimes the most important victories happen when no one realizes there was ever a battle. The reception flowed into evening with the kind of seamless perfection that only unlimited budgets and military-grade planning could achieve. Guests danced to music performed by musicians who normally played for heads of state, while waiters served desserts that were basically edible art created by chefs whose restaurants required reservations booked months in advance. I found myself actually enjoying conversations with relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, discussing everything except the fact that I just helped prevent the compromise of intelligence operations across multiple continents. The official story would be that Senator Grayson had suffered a medical emergency and been quietly transported for treatment. The unofficial reality was that she was beginning cooperation with intelligence agencies that were very interested in learning exactly how much damage she'd done to national security over the past decade. As the evening wound down and guests began departing in their Maseratis and Bentleys, Isabella found me on the garden terrace where string lights created the kind of romantic atmosphere that wedding planners dream about achieving. She'd changed into her departure outfit, Something elegant and travel appropriate for a honeymoon that would probably involve private jets and accommodations that appeared in luxury travel magazines. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For being here. For protecting me. For showing up when it mattered most, even after we treated you like you didn't matter at all. I looked out over the estate's manicured grounds, where security teams were already beginning the discreet process of returning everything to normal operation status. I never stopped being your brother, Isabella. I just got very good at protecting people who never knew they needed protection. Will I see you again? Or do you disappear back into whatever shadowy world you inhabit between family crises? Before I could answer, my encrypted phone buzzed with a priority message. Operation Meridian complete. Asset neutralized. Network compromised. Your presence requested for debriefing and new assignment coordination. Congratulations on preventing international intelligence catastrophe while maintaining perfect wedding guest protocol. I smiled, showing her the message without revealing any classified details. Apparently, I'm very good at my job. But I'm also very good at being a brother when my family needs me. She hugged me then. The kind of embrace that carries years of missed connections and misunderstandings, all dissolved in the relief of finally understanding that some family members protect you in ways you never realize until the moment when everything could have gone devastatingly wrong. As Isabella and Alexander departed for their honeymoon in a vintage Rolls-Royce that probably cost more than most people's homes, I reflected on the strange irony of the day. I'd spent years being excluded from family events because my work was too classified to discuss, too dangerous to acknowledge, too important to celebrate publicly. But today, that same work had protected not just my sister's wedding, but potentially the security of multiple nations. The last guests departed into the night, their luxury vehicles disappearing down the estate's tree-lined drive like expensive ghosts returning to whatever rarefied world they inhabited between social obligations. Victoria's team completed their evidence collection with the kind of efficiency that leaves no traces of the operation that had just concluded successfully. I stood alone on the terrace where it had all begun, looking out over grounds that had hosted one of the most successful counterintelligence operations in recent history, disguised as a society wedding that would be remembered in social circles for all the wrong reasons and in intelligence circles for all the right ones. My encrypted phone rang with a call from my new commanding officer. Outstanding work, Kane. The Meridian network has been completely compromised, and Senator Grayson's cooperation is providing intelligence that will prevent similar operations for years to come. Report for reassignment briefing Monday morning. Understood, I replied. And sir, next time my family needs protection, I'd prefer advance notice instead of discovering threats through wedding invitation analysis. His laughter carried the appreciation of someone who understood that the best operations often happen when personal stakes and professional duty align perfectly. We'll keep that in mind, Major. Enjoy your weekend off. You've earned it. I ended the call and walked back through the estate that had been transformed from a wedding venue into the site of a successful counterintelligence operation and back into a wedding venue. All without most of the guests ever realizing they'd witnessed history being made between the champagne service and the cake-cutting ceremony. Tomorrow, I'd return to work that officially doesn't exist, protecting people who will never know my name from threats they'll never see coming. But tonight, I was just Christopher Kane, the brother who'd made sure Isabella's perfect wedding stayed perfect, even when perfection required stopping international espionage between the ceremony and the reception. Some fairy tales end with the princess marrying her prince. Others end with the princess's brother preventing intelligence catastrophes while maintaining perfect social protocol and ensuring the champagne never stopped flowing. I decided I preferred the second kind of fairy tale, especially when it ended with family photos that would never make it into society magazines, but would always remind us that sometimes the most important victories happen when no one realizes there was ever a war being fought. The drive back to Manhattan took me through autumn landscapes that looked like they'd been painted by artists who specialized in making reality look too beautiful to be real. My Aston Martin purred along highways that wound through countryside where estates like Whitmore existed in their own carefully protected bubbles of wealth and influence. By the time I reached my penthouse, dawn was beginning to touch the edges of the skyline with fingers of gold and rose. Central Park stretched out below my windows like a green oasis in the concrete and steel jungle, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere that wasn't a classified briefing room or a hostile operational theater. My secure communication system was already buzzing with congratulations from colleagues whose names I could never mention and whose work would never appear in official records. The Meridian operation had been a complete success, preventing intelligence leaks that could have compromised national security for decades while maintaining perfect operational security disguised as family reunion drama. I poured myself a glass of the 30-year-old Macallan I kept for moments that required appropriate celebration, and raised a toast to the empty penthouse. To Isabella, I said aloud, who got the perfect wedding she deserved, even if it required stopping international espionage to make it happen. The whiskey tasted like victory, like justice, and like the kind of family reconciliation that only happens when protecting the people you love requires using skills that officially don't exist to stop threats that never happened at events that will be remembered for all the wrong reasons by people who never knew they were in danger. Some stories end with the hero riding into the sunset. Others end with the hero preventing international intelligence catastrophes during society weddings, and then going home to luxury penthouses where no one will ever know that civilization was just protected by someone whose greatest achievement was ensuring his sister's champagne never stopped flowing and her wedding photos came out perfectly. I decided I preferred the second kind of story, especially when it ended with encrypted phone calls congratulating me on work that would never appear in newspapers but would always be remembered by the people whose lives were protected by operations that officially never happened. Tomorrow, I'd return to protecting the world from threats it would never see coming. Tonight, I was just a brother who'd made sure his sister's perfect day stayed perfect, even when perfection required skills that most wedding guests would never imagine existed. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. That felt like everything.